Okay, so provided I work a lot, and sometimes it's difficult for me to see where work ends and where life begins, because it's kind of all, you know, together for me, and it's always been like this. I think like ballet dancers, their life is ballet, and you cannot differentiate what is life, what is ballet. It's a whole, and I feel like this because I've been living my passion and then created my own company, and so I do work a lot, and most of what I like is actually teaching and, you know, finding new concepts and learning and all of that. But I do have a few things that I really love to do. The first thing that comes to mind is, first, well, obviously I love ballet, so I love to see ballets. I don't get to do it quite often anymore because I live in Lisbon, and when I come to Paris I work in the evening, but in New York I used to go out with a principal dancer from American Ballet Theater, and I think I was at the opera almost every night. I mean, at least four times a week. So that was fun, and the ballet is something that I really like. Another thing that I really, really like is actually the opera. I'm a huge Verdi fan, especially, so Italian opera. My top three is Rigoletto, Aida, and La Traviata, and those are operas that I know by heart. Don't ask me to sing them because I could not sing to save my life, but I'm a huge opera fan. Last year, or was it a year and a half ago, I went to the Arena di Verona in Italy to watch Aida in the arenas, the old Roman ruins, and it was such a magical experience. I really loved the Met more than any other house actually in the world that I've been to, and I always check the schedule, because if I see an opera that I really like, I tend to try and go for the weekend and then see that opera. I love classical productions. I don't really like so much the modern production, just because I feel like it's just less powerful. I mean, once I saw Rigoletto where they were in Vegas and you had these women, doing striptease and all of that, and I just really didn't see the point. I like the classical thing because I like to dream, and I feel when you see a classical production of either a ballet or an opera, it's just that much more magical to see the old costumes, and it takes you out of your ordinary, modern life, so as to go back to a past time. So I like classical production of Italian operas, if I have to be very precise. Another thing I like is obviously my oat milk latte, and I am, wherever I travel, I always try to find the best coffee shops, and I've been checking out coffee shops for quite a few years. They were not so popular in Paris at the time. So I remember when I moved to Berlin, I tried every single coffee shop. At the time in Paris, you had really a small amount of coffee shops. Now they're everywhere. We're always a little late, but I love to check out coffee shops, and after class or before class, just to meet up with a friend and have my oat milk latte. You know that the milk has to be Oatly barista blend, otherwise it doesn't work. And also, just to say, I was drinking oat before it was fashionable, and not because now everything has to be there. Just I really love Oatly, and I'm a huge Oatly fan since 2016 or 2015. So there you go, very faithful fan. Well, I obviously like to travel, and the good thing about my work and how my work, I still can't believe that's my work, because at first I was just really working in studios, and when I was in New York, I only traveled twice a year, twice to Paris to see my family for Christmas, and then we have a lot of birthdays at the same time, and then on that summer trip, for the birthday trip, I would always go on vacation most of the time in Italy. And so while I was living in New York, I didn't explore many places. I went to Mexico for 4 days. Woo, that was my vacation, a 4-day trip to Mexico. And then I was lucky to go to Italy. I explored Tuscany, Florence, and Capri. I went a few times to Capri and the Amalfi Coast. I discovered Rome, Milano, But most of the time I would go to Italy. I know Madrid a little bit because my sister is married with a wonderful man from Madrid, and so she lived there for a while, and I would just go there for the summer and explore the city. I think there was something magical about exploring a city alone, and I'm gonna tell you why. When you're, oftentimes I see, living in Lisbon, I see a lot of couple doing a trip, and it's very nice to do a trip as a couple, but you just don't do the same thing. So I see those couples and I kind of like observe them and what they do, and it's just like there is something quite magical about exploring a new city on your own, because when you do that, you tend to really go to the coffee shop and talk with the coffee shop person. You tend to go to whichever thing that, you know, and it's something you have to dare to do. But I do think from trips I have taken, whether I was with someone or alone, the ones that taught me the most and the ones that I've enjoyed the most, I have to say, were the ones alone. Not that I enjoyed the most, but the ones where I got to know a city better. It's a better way to put it. Not necessarily the best trips, but if you want to know a city, I think it's so nice to explore alone. And I think there is something magical about this, and I kind of want to encourage people to travel alone, even if you're in a couple, even if, you know, again, like I sometimes I book myself an opera tickets and I go alone, or and it's just so, I don't know, there's something about finding yourself and reconnecting to what you really like without having to feel bad for dragging someone that might not like it, or there is times for sharing, and I really love to share, and I love when people share with me. I love when people are interested in going to, you know, bring someone to the ballet or something like that, and I love when people are curious. There is something though about sometimes, once in a while, traveling alone, where you really learn a lot about where you're going, and it's a very, very, very different trip. So I think it's interesting to maybe first get to know a city that way, and then if you really like it, you take your person and you show them around. But I'm quite lucky to have moved to different countries and different major cities always on my own. So I always initially move on my own, then obviously I meet people. Oh no, once when I moved to Chicago, it was as a couple. Well, I hated Chicago, by the way, so no, I love Chicago, but at the time it was not my best year. But you see, I've always arrived places alone, and I think there was something really good about doing that. I also like to walk in nature, and there is something that, again, like going somewhere alone, to just reconnect with yourself, and from breaking from the day-to-day where you might be taking the subway, being stressed out. I think that walking in nature alone, especially, so if you go through a hard time, I couldn't recommend it enough to, whenever I would go through a hard time, I would walk and walk and walk endlessly. Like I remember, I think last year there was a day I walked like 32 kilometers or something like that. So it doesn't have to be that extreme. But if you get to walk along some water, if you're lucky to live along the water, or even, you know, could be the sand if you don't have the ocean, or in the forest. I walk a lot in the forest also because my parents live kind of in the forest. Something that disconnects you from noise and from technology, and you do that, and you know, you listen to beautiful music, or I always learn languages that way, so I listen to, you know, language podcasts. That's another thing that I like to do, is learn languages, because I feel you never fully understand people unless you understand how they express themselves. And you might see in your personal life, if you can have trouble sometimes in relationships with people who don't communicate, it's because communication is just the most important thing. And I feel like when you don't speak the same language, you understand each other, but there is always a 5-10% that you don't understand. I only went out once with a French person. All my other boyfriends were foreigners, and there is a difference when you understand their language fluently, or when you speak English whereas you both speak another language. Your maternal language is something else. So I think learning languages is a skill. And it is something, whenever someone is depressed, I tell them, learn a language. Seriously, there was something magical about suddenly crossing the street, hearing people talk, and being able to understand what they say when 3 months ago you had no idea. So for me now, I understand Italian, I think quasi tutto, and it's so amazing because it's like a code, and you broke the code, you know, and I really love that. I think that's all. Again, I'm lucky that my job is it's a hobby in a certain way. So I'm lucky that for me, practicing yoga, practicing fitness and all of that, I don't mention it here because it's also part of my job. All the rest is, you know, hopefully, I don't know, it's helped you a little bit, give you some ideas. You can let me know in the comments. See you on the channel very soon. Have a good one.